All right. Wonderful. Erin, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with me. This is a space where I talk about science fiction and spirituality in the realm of storytelling. And so I wonder if you could take some time and tell us about who you are and how those things have shown up in your life.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. As I say numerous times, any chance to talk about the books, the story, just the whole saga and how it evolved and how I've injected, our own lives into it is a huge, huge blessing. So thank you. So I am a Christian. My wife is a Christian. Our kids are Christians. We are a very faith-filled family. I've injected a certain degree of that into my books because, far too often I think people forget in terms of overall wellness that we are spiritual beings as well. We're not just physical, we're not just emotional, we're not psychological. None of those are exclusive or mutually exclusive. We are spiritual beings as well. And so I have characters that go through very emotional struggles, physical struggles, psychological struggles, spiritual struggles. And there are characters at play in the books, particularly, I should say starting at the very end of volume one, all through the prequels, that just, they bring to light a reminder that spirituality and being connected to God in heaven is super important and critical for wellness. I started writing in second grade. I was commanded to write in an assignment by my second grade teacher. So construction paper, three-hole punch college rule paper, silly stick figure drawings, and the best I could scratch out handwriting. I wrote a story called The Electric Boy, and I can't find it anywhere. My mom gave it to me a few years ago, and I cannot find it, and that just burns me up. I got an A on it, of course, but um, I think I got an A or an O. I think they gave you an O for outstanding back then. Um, but yeah, I've always loved being a storyteller. I actually have two careers right now that are on somewhat parallel tracks. One is a voiceover artist, voice actor. That's my studio back there with my little special that's my mascot right there. That's Macy Girl. So she's our
What?
12-year-old lab hound pointer right there.
Oh, I see her.
Yeah, I think I can zoom in, but I don't know if it's going to zoom in on her. So let me see if I can actually zoom in on this. Where's my, is this going to go? That's brightness. Zoom. Can you see her any clearer?
Oh, yes. Look at her. She's so sweet.
Macy. Yep, there she is. She's very comfortable. So when she comes in, she goes right to that chair and like that's her chair. It's no longer mine. Um, but yeah, I'm a voice actor, voiceover artist, whatever you want to call it. I'm a storyteller for other people, but now I have made a return to authoring and wrote and published six voiceover books in my voiceover career, but I'm returning to fiction novelization. So I tell other people's stories in voiceovers, I tell my own in authoring, and ne'er the twain shall meet, except when I record my own audiobooks from my books. But I love it. I'm very, very happy camper.
So, how did your faith always intersect with your writing, or did that come later?
No, it came really virtually at the end of volume one, but pronouncedly, is that a word? I'm going to coin it now. Pronouncedly. The pronouncementification of it happened in volume three, where my character actually accepts Jesus as Savior in volume three of my books. And, that for me is something that I know is going to turn off people. That's okay. I get it. You can't please everyone anyway. But it was indispensable to me as a Christian, as a spiritual person. It's part of my walk, it's part of my life. And as with the first prequel in the series, there are now five, and the sixth one is right there. It's on my left, side of my monitor, with 296 pages. That makes it a hexalogy, a series of six books. That's right there. So it's going to be a six-book series. But in the first prequel, um, boy, there's a lot of faith injected in there, and I put a lot of myself and my own spiritual journey into the main protagonist of the prequel, Andrew Shipley, who is Cameron and Ruddy's father, who are the protagonists of the first books. Um, again, it's just indispensable is probably the operative word here. I couldn't not.
I wonder. would you be able to give a synopsis of the story that you're telling in this six-book series,
I would
for
love
folks who are
to.
listening? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would love to. Favorite question. That's my absolute favorite question. So, and I do a lot of trade shows and craft fairs and vendor markets selling these books. So, if this sounds a little rote, I think by now I've perfected my presentation with the synopsis. So it's this is what I say to everyone. So, in 2026, we're going about our business, living our lives. One day, June 6th, out of nowhere, out of the sky, these things come drifting down all over the planet by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. They're not crafts, drones, ships, probes. They are beings. And they're just drifting down and fanning out and taking up position all over the planet. Looks very similar to this image right here on the cover of the prequel Dissonance Volume Zero Revelation. You can see our little not so friendly friend hanging there in the sky.
Yeah.
And the log line is, we thought they were angelic messengers. We were wrong. Um, they wait there for 90 days, which is why we think they're angelic messengers. They don't do anything and they don't attack us, so we think maybe they're benign. Well, September 3rd, 2026 rolls around. They all activate at the same time all over the planet. They start jetting out this bluish green mist around them. They look down and they hiss, and everything pretty much goes south from there. They are horrifyingly fast and they are apex predators. They're not here to help us. Within 3 more months, 95%, 85% of all mankind and organic life is all killed off. And very post-apocalyptic scenario. The survivors are living underground in these fortified military bunkers called blockades. We call them Gorgons because, much like Medusa the Gorgon, you cannot, under any circumstances, lock eyes with them. If you do, and they with you, it's all over. They have a telepathic paralytic. They're going to freeze you where you stand. They're going to eat you at their leisure, and you're going to feel every single bite. So it's a very agonizing situation. Um, so the brothers are in volume one. They're finding out that something is going on big after 16 years of alien occupation. The invasion happens in 2026. The main books of the trilogy are set in 2042 on Earth, 16 years after this post-apocalyptic, wasteland has happened. Um, Something big is going on. They're not being told. They experience trauma. It leads up to a massive counterstrike where we kick the aliens off the planet. Woohoo! Happy ending. Humans win. Um, and but I realized there's so much backstory, so I went back and wrote a prequel from their dad's perspective, before, during, and after the invasion. What I love is in the trilogy, they are Cameron and Ruddy are 6 and 2. Sorry, 23 and 19. You go back to the prequel and then from their dad's perspective, and they're 6 and 2. And so you see them, their personalities being formed, and the shape that the world is taking and their worldview is taking.
So, what has been your experience then with like other post-apocalyptic stories, or why was that I mean, genre is maybe not the exact right word, but why was it that genre of storytelling that got your attention, for this narrative or this message that you're bringing to folks,
Yeah.
or how these
Post
characters came to life?
Well, post-apocalyptic for a Christian is something that is a little bit of a uh what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't exist, right? It can't exist. I mean, unless you're a survivor in the after the Antichrist, rises to power, and you're in the post-revelation time frame, and you're in the end times. Well, it's just a conundrum for most people to even imagine such a scenario. What would this look like, and why would it happen? You do find out why that was. Post-apocalyptic books and the genre, it's the correct word, are very popular. However, many of them take the viewpoint of a dystopian environment. So there's regimes and there's elites and poor, rich and poor, definite segregation between those with power and those without. A a malignant ruler of some kind, an autocrat. And that wasn't where I necessarily wanted to go with it, although there are elements of that. We watched I Am Legend literally the night before, my wife and I watched it literally the night before I started putting pen to paper. And by that I mean keyboard to Microsoft Word. Um, and November 21st last year, when I started writing these. And I was just very inspired and moved and curious about what that world was like. In I Am Legend, It's a virus. It's a rabies virus that has killed off, virtually everyone. And there are zombies. So there's no zombies. Post-apocalyptic books tend to suggest or connote there's zombies at play somewhere. I don't have zombies in anywhere of mine. These are alien invaders that have come. Um, but I loved the visual representation, and I'm inspired visually of weeds growing up 5, 6 feet tall through the cracks, an unmaintenanced world, lions roaming free in the street. The custodians have been taken out of play, humans. And so, what would that be like fusing that kind of scenario with the causal effect being an alien invasion that has killed off humanity? So, it was more of a fusion of genres, I would say.
Really interesting. I I wonder too, um, because I think I heard you say early on there's a lot of you and a lot of your family in the story. Does this mirror your own faith journey in any way? What the characters experience, what they go through, and how that resonates with how you share the story with other people?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of trauma and sadness that is part and parcel of such a catastrophe, such just an absolute unfortunate circumstance like this would propel everyone emotionally into a downward spiral, spiritually into a downward spiral, socially, certainly when 85% of mankind has been killed off. And we need some kind of panacea eventually, that we can latch onto it in the end. But I think my walk and my wife's walk is pretty solid. And because that's the case, I wanted to have at least a few characters in the book. I didn't want to make it an overtly Christian novel and thus limit the audience. It is not an overtly Christian novel, although there are elements in there pronouncedly, to that end. But I wanted to, if you do that all the time, you're going to risk saturation. You're going to risk, an overdone message. And when that happens, it kind of leads people a little bit like, oh man, it's just too. You feel like they're beating you, you're beating them over the head with a spiritual message, and no one likes that.
And so maybe to some extent, is it just the
Mm.
fun of writing sort of a science fiction genre, and having the boundaries of the normal fiction world sort of blown open a little bit?
So I am having audio difficulties, and I'm not sure what's going on with my headphones. So I'm going to switch here real quick.
Go for
I
it.
I hope that's okay, and I apologize.
That's
I don't know
absolutely
what's going
okay.
on.
No
Give me one
worries.
second here. I don't know what happened. Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I have zero idea what happened. It just started getting very staticky, and then it was like, and it was gradual. So I heard you at first, and then it was a little bit like, okay, maybe there's a faint crackle that's going to subside in a while. It didn't subside. So anyway, could you kindly repeat the last question? And I'm so
Of
sorry.
course. Yeah, I guess what is it about writing science fiction, right? You could write a story about trauma and loss in a very realistic way. What is it
Hmm.
about science fiction that drew you, that compels you to tell the story in this way?
I'm a nerd. Yeah, I mean that really is the bottom line answer. I just really am a nerd. So I've always loved science fiction since I was a little boy. I've always loved the notion of not that I believe that they exist or that my belief should suggest that they exist. Um, I've always loved aliens and otherworldly beings and Star Trek and Star Wars and things like that. You're absolutely right. A story can have plenty of story if it just deals with trauma and growth and persevering through adversity. I wanted again to honestly when I sat down after watching I Am Legend, which is a sci-fi movie, I was thinking of writing just a single book about an alien invasion. But what happened is as I was going through, the protagonist and his little brother and others are realizing something very big is going on here. There's a subtle undercurrent happening. There's another narrative that's running parallel to our main protagonist's view, and it's big. it's sounding, and we're feeling these reverberations, penetrate into our own story. So and I, as an author, I'm a pantser. I write very organically. So I'm writing, and I had no intention of just making these parallel tracks. But when this other one, organically met and intersected with this one, I went, oh, oh, oh. And it was such a very, very cool evolution of storytelling, where I started to fuse that natural story of trauma, natural story of survival into, and just, folded it into this alien invasion scenario. I think it would stand on its own without the aliens, because the sad truth of the matter is that mankind is always the worst enemy of mankind. We always are. So we get in each other's way, we throw each other under the bus, we're always jockeying for position, we're, putting ourselves forward, and it's the sad reality. So yes, it's standalone as a survival trauma story, but it kind of ended up superseding the alien element in some respects.
And I can tell that it's a story that it's like there's a give and take. Like those authors that say that the characters tell them what's next, or the characters this idea that your characters can see you as much as you
Yes.
can see them. Have you found that to be true, that your these characters have opened up things for you?
Absolutely. I mean, you want to talk about art intruding upon reality. So I actually have in my calendar, I know this sounds psychotic, feel free and call help if you need to. I have my main characters' birthdays in my Outlook calendar. My real life calendar has fictional characters' birthdays in it. They mean the world to me. I want them to exist. It's, I've marinated in this story for over a year. It's so compelled me and burst out of me like an alien queen. Again, sci-fi. Um, I just absolutely, I love this story, and I love the depth, the thematic depth inherent in this story. Um, so and yes, I like I said earlier, I'm a pantser, which for people who don't know that term, there's a planner and a pantser, or a plotter and a pantser is what they're called. And the plotter, or the planner writer, has virtually everything bullet pointed out. Like they've got their waypoints and their mileposts, and it's and there's hardly really any deviation. Everything needs to be structured. I'm much more of an organic right brain, let the characters lead me where they want to go, because art imitates life that way. You have where you need to go. I'm going to go to the dentist. On the way, though, I'm going to get a flat. My child's going to throw up in the car. We might get in a wreck. It's going to hail. And all of these different things can happen that are absolutely out of my control. And how I adapt reveals my character. The same is absolutely true for fictional characters. And I forget who said this quote, but the goal of a writer is to get your protagonist up a tree and throw rocks at them and see how they handle it. I mean, that is what I like my characters to do, is lead me organically. So I let them thread the way, and I just follow.
Um, I like the image of seeing what a character does in response to a stressful situation. I'm not sure if I know exactly how to phrase this question that's come to my mind, but there is some sense when um you create characters that, like, you're the creator, which is not too dissimilar from how we might talk about being created in the image of God. Like somehow these characters are representative of parts of you.
Yeah.
Um, you have does being an author enrich your own faith or spirituality in a way that maybe other things in your life have not done in the same way?
Yeah. It's almost a calling and a ministry. Um, in the sense that I put, and I don't want to put any spoilers here, so I'm dancing around the flames here carefully. Uh, a character receives Christ as Savior in Volume 3. That was indispensable to me. I mentioned that earlier, but that type of thing is what I believe in. That's so true to who I am. And is it playing God? I mean, playing God to me is killing off and or resurrecting characters and creating characters and stuff. I don't like playing God in that respect when you're forced to kill off a character for the sake of advancing the narrative or serving some character development purpose in the protagonist. I've never liked that. It's a sad reality of writing that is just something that has to happen, and you have absolute, sovereign control over in your book to do that. So as an author, yes, I create and take life, and it's just a really eerie responsibility. It's like Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Um, but the thing is, people can do that haphazardly, and I'm a member, and I'm actually an admin of a 31,000 member author group on Facebook, and I co-admin two other groups of several thousand members. And we all talk about this frequently. It's a common trope in the groups that you some people will simply nonchalantly, cavalierly kill off characters, in, like, for example, in a horror genre, or any genre, and there's no purpose to it. There's no rhyme or reason. I don't like that. I think that's very flippant. I think it's very irresponsible. But I do have characters killed, and I hate it. It is to galvanize the protagonist into action. It's to equip them to go in on their own and rely on either themselves and know that they had it in them all along, or to rely on the Lord and know that He had it, available to them all along. Um, it's a really weird dichotomy, and a crazy line to straddle, because I hate it, and it disassembles me in the writing and the editing and the audio narration when I am describing the death of someone I created. Uh, in sometimes rich detail. It hurts so bad. And I've wept. You can hear, I voiceover artist, I've recorded my own audiobooks. You can hear me in the audiobook recordings bawling at the loss of so and so
Yeah. Yeah.
and so and so and so and so, and other people. It's amazing how much it affects you.
So gosh, when you think about kind of when you pull back and you see the arc of this narrative through these books, is it the Dissonance series? Is that a fair way to encapsulate all of them, or would you have a different,
Yeah, the Dissonance series or the Dissonance Saga.
the Dissonance Saga? Um, what would be a fair, um, like, what would be the message you want people to carry from these stories or from your work as a storyteller, as a person of faith? What is the gift you're giving to people and leaving this work for others for years and years to come?
Yeah. Um, it was not meant in any respect to be a referendum on current society. The problem and the challenge that we have to overcome is right there in the title. It's inherent in the title. Dissonance. It's the very opposite of harmony. It is, two notes conflicting with each other, creating a strain, lack of, of elements working together. And that really is harkens back to what we were talking about earlier, that mankind really is the worst enemy of mankind always. At some level in the series, as you progress, you realize that the aliens, the Gorgons, are or become little more than a nuisance at some point. We have to deal with each other. So the central message is, yes, of course, we have dissonance with a predatory alien species. No harmony there, right? Um, we all get that. But when it comes to our fellow man, why are we 16 years after an alien invasion? How are we still not getting along? How are we still not making things work together? How are we destroying more than we're creating? And it is a little bit of a referendum just on humanity, not necessarily on this, political year that we're having. Although, so be it if you want to apply it that way. Uh, I think that the central message is that, we have to get along, but there's thematic depth that just flows through the series. For case in point, trust versus cynicism, revenge versus letting justice happen, going from snarkiness, choosing snarkiness and immaturity to maturity. The protagonist goes on a pretty wide, traumatic character arc. He's forced down that path. And do we linger? What the dissonance stems from us lingering and stewing in our own misery, um, because we can't see past ourselves. So I think, that would be another message is can we find a way to see past ourselves?
I'm struck too by the blockades, the living underground and what that would be like. Um, and to imagine that, and of course, um, all the loss, like sort of the loss is literally just above you, like you're kind of carrying the heaviness of earth that what it was as you
Yeah.
go about your day. Um, and this idea of justice. Um, and like the Gorgons are sort of unfeeling. I mean, they don't seem
Hmm.
to have a lot of like a felt sense of who they are and how they're growing and changing as beings. They're just here to cause chaos.
Yeah.
Um, what does justice look like against something that's not like against something like that? Even though people, I'm gonna make a bold statement. People aren't like that, I'm going to say, but we have these elements in our life that um like for instance the like a terrible storm. We've seen so many terrible storms recently, but a
Yeah.
storm is terrible and it's tragic, but it's not something we can seek justice from necessarily. I suppose if you zoomed out, you could talk about how people help people in the midst of a storm or what creates storms and things of that nature. But the storm itself is like an is not it has no feelings about us. It's just a
Yeah.
storm. Um, how do you talk about justice in the face of something that can't perceive justice,
It's a
like the
really good
Gorgons?
question. Yeah, it's a really good question. The same is true as if you're walking in the Serengeti and you're, being stared down by a lion. They just happen to be animals. There is a level of intelligence there, and there's a level of, malevolence, obviously, that far exceeds something like a shark just doing what it's programmed to do, a lion just doing what it's programmed to do. But one of the greatest lines I ever heard out of a movie, and I'm much more inspired, cinematically, if I haven't said that already, is out of the Terminator. It's so much so that I actually quoted it, I believe, in volume one. And Kyle Reese says to Sarah Connor, when she is, not believing his story, she's incredulous at this far-fetched tale of him coming from the future to save her. And he says, listen and understand that Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop ever until you are dead. And that cold lack of sentiment, that unfeeling, removed, nonchalant, cavalier, uh, programmatic pursuit of whatever it is, killing for pleasure, killing for food. It's psychopathic when you apply it to humans. For animals, it's simply animalistic, and with the Gorgons, it's simply animalistic. However, the book tends to plumb more the depths of human depravity and what happens when we become animals, when we lower ourselves to this level and stoop to these lows of putting ourselves forward at the expense of another, even if that means that person dies. I think there's a real stark example, excuse me, of the main protagonist in volume two, where he comes really close to pursuing. In fact, he does actually pursue revenge. Trying to be careful here with not spoiling anything. He pursues revenge instead of letting justice happen, which is what he's been counseled to do. And he's no better than a Gorgon at that level, so he's learning as well.
That's really interesting. I think I don't know which tribe, but I remember coming across a Native American parable that each of us inside us has two wolves, one that is good and one that is not, and the wolf who leads us is the wolf that we feed.
Yes.
And I wonder too about how mercy fits in with justice for you or in the series of books. I know in my own life, I've often thought of mercy being the path justice. Like whether or not you get justice or you don't get justice, you can still experience mercy in your own life and extend it to others. It's kind of a notion of like if you asked me for a dozen oranges right now, I couldn't give you any. I don't have any. I'd have to go get some. Like I can't give you what I don't have for myself. So if I can be
Right.
merciful towards myself, I can be merciful towards someone else. If I can open myself to that experience, which can be vulnerable to say I need someone's mercy and understanding,
Mm.
then I can sit with someone else in their vulnerability. That was a little bit of a diatribe about mercy, but how do you see mercy with justice in this universe you've created?
It's a great question. That's nothing new. I mean, gosh, how long has that problem been going on? I mean, it's happening in Ukraine and Russia. It's happening in Israel and Gaza. Israel and Gaza, since uh, Isaac or Jacob and Esau. I mean, it goes back so far, and it just has roots in history and roots in our soul. So yeah, mercy triumphs over judgment is a verse out of the book of James. It always does. People don't get it. Romans talks about heaping burning coals on someone's head by helping them instead of judging them, or helping them instead of hindering or harassing or hurting them. We want to take revenge. We're very vengeant people. We are oriented towards self-preservation, and if someone hurts us, we want to hurt us back. I have 8 and 5 year old boys. They're right there in those pictures, and constantly they get along really well. I mean, there are the anomalies of misbehavior, and one hits and the other hits back. Neither are right in that case because you don't hit and you don't retaliate. They know that. But in the heat of passion, our mercy goes out the window and we are seeking judgment. It's such a the rubber meets the road in every one of those situations. We can't just, fly a banner and say, I'm a mercy bringer. No, you're a mercy bringer in every single situation that demands that you show mercy. And you could succeed 5 times, fall once, succeed 8, fall twice. Every single time comes down to it. It's a choice. It's always a choice.
I mean, it's a really rich conversation too, to think about um, just the vastness of the human experience and what it might look like if there were only 15% of us left. And
Yeah.
um, it would bring us very close to one another, right? The characters are brought very close and depend upon one another, to some extent, right, to
Yeah.
survive. If we don't get along, we're going to die. I
Right.
wonder about your own experiences, and how community has been a support to you in this career you've built as a storyteller, as a person of faith, and where you hope to take this universe that you've created in this saga.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest news, and I'm not pinning any of my hopes to this at all. I'm so excited and so grateful to announce that Dissonance Volume 1 Reality, which is the very first one I wrote, has been adapted for the screen, is being pitched to major streaming networks right now. And I can't say who they are because, full disclosure and NDAs and all that, but um, man, that's every author's dream, isn't it? To have their book adapted for the screen and to have so many people take hold of it. What's been the challenge as a self-published author is the marketing aspect and just continually trying to grease that wheel and get community everywhere excited about this story. You can look at an alien invasion genre or trope and assume, okay, it's Independence Day. There wasn't a lot of depth, thematic depth or character development or anything like that. It was a lot of special effects. There is story there, and it's a great story. It's a very comedic movie as well, and there are pronounced moments of, emotional weight. However, I think people have a knee-jerk reaction to that type of genres in the same way they have, a reaction to dystopian or post-apocalyptic zombie uh, fare. So it's been really hard trying to get people interested in the weight of the book. Had I perhaps marketed it as a survival story that just happens to have aliens, as opposed to an alien invasion story that happens to have thematic depth, maybe it would be different. I am in love with the story that I've created, and one of the best bits of advice I was ever given was don't be a marketer, be an enthusiast. Totally different. The advice is absolutely different. And that's what I seek to be everywhere. Regardless, there are, even with family and friends that you would think would be the most supportive and buy the books, even if they don't like Alien Invasion. It's crickets in many cases. It's always me standing on a hilltop somewhere going, sometimes almost begging, you will want to read this story, I guarantee. But people do judge a book by its cover. People don't want things. Um, they would rather buy it on Kindle, which is fine. Buy it on Kindle. It's a digital product, not taking up any space, except in a drive somewhere. Building community has been hard. It is hard. Everyone will hitch their wagon to enthusiasm. So that's where people hitch their wagon to me is through enthusiasm. But committing, going that extra step and buying a book or coming to a book signing party or telling others about the book it's not something I can expect of people because they just don't function that way. There are anomalies, however, in my circle, very few special, precious anomalies that are so I cherish them. They've been beta readers for every book. They've been, editors for every book. They've been, um, proofers for the audiobook files before they go live. They tell people about them. They scream from the rooftops, "Go buy Aaron Ryan's books. They're so good." And I love all of them, but especially those people. Very grateful for those people.
Community, uh, working in therapeutic spaces with folks, there's research time and again that although we have all these habits, right, of how we eat, drink, move, and engage in different activities, the most telling aspect of our well-being and our longevity and our health is our community. Um,
Mm.
because we're created to be in relationship with one another, which is pretty powerful.
Absolutely. You asked about the community in 2042 after this alien invasion and people living underground and are they closer together? Well, Jet is the epitome. Cameron Jet Shipley is the protagonist of the trilogy, the original trilogy. And you would think he's 23 years old, so he's got some growing up to do. But you would think 16 years after an alien invasion, living underground, we're all we have left, that would foster an increased sense of community of love for your fellow man. But he is a cynic, just like his father in the prequel. He's a cynic, and so he has that adversity to overcome as well. But you find that by the end of the trilogy, that he's learned, man, this really is the way. Rodney King had it right all along. Can we all get along? Yeah, I mean, it really, again, trying to steer clear of a referenda based um, message or set of messages, that really is the message is can we all get along? We don't need to live in dissonance any longer. And we shouldn't be after aliens have killed off 85% of us and all the animals and Earth up there outside our blockade is a wreck. Let's work together. We've got to.
I think it's such a powerful message, especially at a time when our access to information can feel so divisive. That the closeness can come even in the face of great loss and great tragedy, because there's, uh, you know, it's one opinion, right? I'm sort of painting with broad strokes, but maybe 20 years ago, great tragedy would unite us, and now it seems like great tragedy still can divide us. More than unite us as a culture, whether it's a country or the earth. Um,
Yeah.
and there is this sense among the sort of as I move about in social media that media itself is a comfort of sorts. Right? We talk about having comfort food. We have comfort media, and I think science fiction is an exceptional example of that because if we fans will take to the Kickstarter and raise funds to make their show happen,
Yeah.
or they'll take to the web and argue their positions and perceptions of what's happening. Do you have a story that comforts you, like a science fiction or otherwise story that entered your life when you needed that myth or metaphor to speak to something that was happening in your own life?
Absolutely. I mean, it's escapism. It's escapism from the harsh reality of the current state of things. I absolutely, and I can't believe I don't have my ring necklace on. I have a necklace with a ring on it. I wear it like that because of the Lord of the Rings. I love it, and it's not the one. I joke. I put my finger. See, I'm still here. Still here. It's not the one ring. Still here. And boy, the Lord of the Rings entered my life in probably 1981, 2, 3, somewhere around there. And I remember reading it and going, what is this? I mean, it was so vast. It was so gargantuan. The backstory, the implied history, the linguism that Tolkien employed. I mean, he invented his own languages. He was a linguist and a professor at Oxford. I just, I love the story. He wrote it over 15 years, from 1939 to 1954. It is the greatest thing I've ever written, save the Bible. I read it every holiday season and go through. I've actually got my own version of it that I made. That is a red leather bound, silver foil stamped version that is incredible. Inset with pictures from the movies. That book is the ultimate escape for me in terms of fiction works. Um, the movies, I love the movies. Not very partial to number two, for a number of reasons, but one and three love them, and two, it's part of the trilogy. I love it. But the books themselves, not The Hobbit. I do enjoy the Hobbit book, but the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy of those three books, are so drenched with meaning. It's like they've been soaked in a vat of significance and just slow brewed and stirred because the dialogues that the characters have, the moral ambiguity of some of the characters, the struggles of some of the characters, the power and potency held at bay for people like Gandalf. Um, Aragorn. It's just amazing, and the trek that they have to go on, and the development that all the characters go through on the way to Mount Doom, so epic. That's what I will turn to if I really want to escape. But frankly, I'm encouraged by my screenwriter these days. Really, you're going to need to continue to be reading yours. Just keep reading your own material because when, not if, when the screenplay is picked up, optioned, the rights are bought by a major studio, they're going to pick it apart and they're going to say, well, what about this and this and this? And I'm going to need to know my source material like the back of my hand. So 6 books now, that cognizance and readiness to recall details with specificity is diminishing because there's so much more source material now. And I have to remember, did I say that? Whatever. And a friend of mine called me on it the other day. He's like, no, you remember, right? Right? And I was like, oh, yes, of course. Yes, I remember. Um, so yeah, I have to decide which ones I'm really going to read more this fall, Lord of the Rings or that fantastic Dissonance series by Aaron Ryan.
I have noted like when television shows from the 90s get added to streaming services, there are clearly those little foibles, like they had no concept that this would be available where people could rewatch it and zoom in and slow down and like get all the information.
Yeah.
So I wish you all of the best clarity and insight around capturing the essence of these characters and this story in a way that when it comes to the Reddit boards, they will have many good things to say.
Yeah. Knock on wood.
When not if, Aaron.
That's right.
Well, I know we're getting close to the end of our time together. I am so like glad that we got to talk about your story and also just about how science fiction can be this really powerful vehicle for conveying important messages about what matters to us and what matters to our communities. Are there
Yeah.
other thoughts, other things I haven't asked that feel important to share, or other things about how science fiction and spirituality intersect in your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at one of the major intersections of science fiction and spirituality, look no further than Star Wars. The mysticism of the Force was meant to be, in George Lucas's words, a spiritual component to Star Wars, and it's engaging this spirit. And I don't endorse that as a religion. I want to be really careful of that. But that is probably the quintessential representation of sci-fi meeting spirituality. I am a huge fan of both Star Trek and Star Wars. Star Trek in particular, I'm a child of the 80s, so the William Shatner movies in particular, love them. I mean, five, but the rest of them, fantastic. It's kind of like Star Wars, you know, um, Episode One, The Phantom Menace, and Attack of the Clones. I don't know. I like to pretend those don't exist,
Yeah,
but allow me that little fantasy. But I do prefer when held at gunpoint, I will pick Star Wars, every day of the week and twice on Sunday because there's a gritty realism in Star Wars that is lacking in Star Trek. Star Trek is antiseptic, squeaky clean, out in space. They got it together. It's a hopeful, optimistic view of the future. And that was exactly the way Gene Roddenberry wanted it. Star Wars is, on the other hand, oil dripping through the panelization of the Millennium Falcon. Han Solo and Chewie constantly at each other's throats trying to fix this whatever is malfunctioned in the Millennium Falcon. It's just it's dirty. They grow up on Tatooine. It's a dust planet. You know, the whole saga has a gritty realism to it. That's the way I wanted it in the Dissonance series. I wanted it attainable. Yes, it's sci-fi, but it's not set in a squeaky clean future on a squeaky clean planet, 500,000 light years from us. It's Earth in a very short um, jump into the future, 2026 or 2042. That's all.
yeah.
That's and it's Earth though, so there's a gritty, attainable reality to it. My favorite movie of all time is Aliens. So a big surprise. Sigourney Weaver, 1986 Aliens with by James Cameron. I love the gritty Vietnam-ish realism of that movie. The attainability of the characters, the authenticity of the struggle, the fact that it's not, is made in the 80s, so it's not CGI overblown. It's all puppets and things like that. Men in suits. Greatest movie of all time. I think when you have authentic and gritty and realistic, it lends more weight to the things that don't feel quite gritty or authentic or realistic. And that's the spirit sometimes. It's the spirit isn't gritty, although it can be. It's powerful and potent and empowering. It's not it doesn't feel authentic in the way that humans feel, but it has a different level of reality to it that if we would just open up to it, our minds would be blown. That's why, to bring it full circle in the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about this missing element that a lot of books and stories have of how crucial spirituality is to us, living in and acknowledging that. So anyway, I probably said way too much. I don't even know if you answered a question. Here's Aaron going on his endearing rabbit trail way over here. Come back, Aaron.
Well,
Come back.
well, I think it's a good way to bring us full circle and back to this idea that spirituality matters, and spiritual stories matter. This sort of quintessential part of who we are. Um, and I am just really honored that I got to talk with you today. And I know I will be keeping an eye out for Dissonance to be streaming or projecting somewhere near me soon.
Yeah, thank you. I tell people get the books first because you'll be able to say like, "Oh, I read those books. They're good. I can't wait to see this story on film." So super excited for both iterations.
And I will be carrying the idea of enthusiasm with me from this conversation for sure, because it is very captivating and very contagious.
Very. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Erin, thank you so, so much for your time. I am really appreciative, and I know that, yeah, I'm just going to keep an eye out for all the wonderful things coming your way, and I can't wait to know more about Dissonance.
Yeah, thank you. Can I plug the website if people want to go, if they
Absolutely.
want to look
Go
for
right
the
ahead.
awesome. So it's really simple. AuthorAaronRyan.com. I have to enunciate, not awfulAaronRyan.com. Author AaronRyan.com has, all of my works and social media links and whatnot. The Dissonance website directly for the series and the saga is dissonancetheseries.com. But dissonance is hard to spell, and sometimes people say it dissidence, which is not what it is. It's dissonance. Easier way to go there, excuse me, is getthesebooks.com. Just go to that website and that will forward you to dissonancetheseries.com where you can find the whole saga, all 6 books, background on it, videos, pictures, blah, blah, blah. Enjoy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.